welcome you all to the 16th edition of School of Tomorrow events, Guardians of the Future, Shaping Tomorrow with Generative AI. The non-profit SOT event series was launched by Beacon House in 2000 to engage global communities in conversations that shape the future of schools and societies. I would like to thank Google for education partner TechValley, the lead sponsor for SOT 2023. Other key sponsors include My Backpack, MK Books, Allied Bank Limited, Habib Bank Limited, and Vateem. We also thank our SOT partners and supporters, including Paramount Books and Nestle Pure Life, who have contributed to this year's event. My name is Aisha Ali, and I am head of school for Beacon House, Gulshan Campus, Rawalpindi. Please take a moment to note down some important housekeeping points, please. Please ensure your cell phones are on silent. Entry and exit points are the same. Always stay calm and follow the directions. Please use the SOT app to scan the QR code for question-answer session and for the feedback. Share your thoughts on social media using the hashtags Guardians of the Future and hashtag SOT 2023. If you need assistance, our ushers are here to help you. We are going to have a debate session which is going to last for a complete 1 hour. Our second session for the day is a debate, and the topic is Gender Quotas, Undermine Meritocracy. The moderator for the session is Ms. Sara Munib. Sara Munib, with over 18 years of experience in the education sector, is a proficient leader and a strategist in assessment and qualifications. Having held various pivotal roles in leading schools across Pakistan, she currently serves as the head of assessments and qualification operations at Beacon House School System. Her dedication to youth development and empowerment has consistently driven her commitment to broadening academic opportunities for secondary school students. Over to you, Sara.
Thank you very much. I'm humbled. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 16th edition of the School of Tomorrow event, Guardians of the Future, Shaping Tomorrow with Generative AI. I am Sara Munib, and as you have heard, I will be moderating the session today. I would like to introduce my eminent and seasoned speakers that we have on board, starting, of course, in no order of priority. And as I give your introductions, I would request you to please step up on the stage. So the first speaker that I would like to introduce is Amne Farooqi. Amne is a respected social entrepreneur focusing on gender inclusion and sustainable development. She has over 20 years of experience in Pakistan's impact sector. She is recognized for her work in gender integration, project management, and economic empowerment. Amne curates the Women of the World festivals in Pakistan and is the founder and CEO of Polly and Other Stories. It is a platform supporting artisans. She is also an Acumen and Miller Center Social Enterprise Fellow and the author of Fearless, a book highlighting stories of remarkable Pakistani women. And Amne is our first opposition speaker for the day. Moving on, we have Taha Keher, who is a renowned novelist and journalist, as well as a literary critic. He is known for his 3 acclaimed novels, notably No Funeral for Nazia, which has recently been published in the UK. He has also co-edited The Stained Glass Window, Stories of the Pandemic from Pakistan. His work has been featured in publications such as The News on Sunday, The Wire, and The Hindu, where he has contributed essays, reviews, as well as commentaries. Taha is our first proposition speaker for the day. Now I would welcome to the stage Ms. Khadija Imam, who is serving as the head of people and culture at Switch Communications. Khadija brings over a decade of expertise in HR operations. Her areas of focus include learning management, people and culture orientations, structures and reward frameworks, performance management systems, and talent management. She has previously worked at leading organizations such as Unilever, Nestle, Telenor, Zong, and Kushal Bank. Khadija is our second opposition speaker for this debate. Last but certainly not the least, we have Mr. Sikandar Bezenjo. Sikandar is an accomplished professional who is looking after external engagements at Engro Corporation, Pakistan. With over a decade of experience, he has actively collaborated with public and private sector organizations, focusing on fostering growth and cultivating an inclusive culture. Notably, he co-authored the World Economic Forum's Youth Recovery Report and holds a position on the Advisory Council of the WEF Global Shapers Community. Bezenjo's impactful work extends to his co-founding role in Balochistan Youth Action Committee, aiding remote communities in Pakistan with vital resources and support. Sikandar is our second proposition speaker for the debate. Thank you, esteemed panelists, as well as the audience, for being here and being a part of this discussion. We would also like to thank the sponsors, Google for Education specially, for helping to make this event possible. Please share your feedback after the session and on the SOT Events app, and also don't forget to visit the Immersive Art Exhibition in Gallery 6. Now I would like to introduce the session to you. This session features a parliamentary-style debate in which one team will support the argument for the motion and the other team will oppose it. The motion that we have today, and please listen carefully, is gender quotas undermine meritocracy. The statement implies that enforcing gender quotas could potentially result in individuals being selected purely on the basis of gender rather than their qualifications, which would undermine the principles of merit, fairness, and competence. Are quotas just a quick fix, or can they actually truly resolve issues causing gender imbalances? This session will explore the complexities and aim to reveal the real effects and consequences of gender quotas in our pursuit of a fair and balanced future. We would like to record the opinion of the audience before we formally begin this enthralling debate and set the stage on fire. Members of the audience are kindly requested to consider whether they are for the motion, against the motion, or would like to abstain. I would repeat the motion, which is gender quotas undermine meritocracy. Your opinion is very valuable to us. The login details are displayed here at the back, and the voting is open. Please note that we have reserved another 3 minutes for the pre-session online poll, and we will be displaying the results of this poll at the end of the session. Meanwhile, let me quickly explain the House rules to the participants of the debate. Each participant will have 7 minutes to present their initial arguments, followed by another 2 minutes to respond to the questions raised by the opposing side. We will begin with the first proposition speech, followed by a point of information raised by the opposition team. Moving forward, we will have an introductory speech from the first opposition speaker, followed by a point of information from the proposition. The same order will repeat for the second round of speeches, followed by a point of information raised by the opposing sides. We will then have both the sides of the House present their summary speeches in 4 minutes, followed by the post-debate poll. Please, may I request you to scan the code behind me to participate in the pre-debate poll. Moving on, during their response, the speakers are advised not to bring up any new arguments or new evidence except in direct refutation to the material that has already been presented. There will be no heckling, there will be no points of order or points of personal privilege raised. Courtesy must be shown to all speakers at all times, and I hope that all of us today have the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Let us move forward to see which team will manage to swing the audience's opinions in its favor. I would now declare the House open and request the first speaker of the proposition team to share his views with us.
Before I go on to completely dismiss gender quotas, I'd like to state that gender quotas are a well-meaning policy instrument to tackle gender disparities in the workplace. I completely understand that there's a pressing need to increase the number of women in the workforce, especially in conventionally male-dominated spaces. Even so, gender quotas stand the danger of diminishing the scope of meritocracy. Now, conventional wisdom would have us believe that meritocracy is simply just a matter of you having the qualifications to get somewhere. But I submit to you that meritocracy on its own is a patriarchal structure. And I want to found the rest of my argument on that principle. Meritocracy is a prisoner of patriarchal expectations. It is fueled by simplistic yardsticks of success, which HR professionals tend to adopt, and they favor men. Now, many people would argue that, great, since meritocracy is all about patriarchy and reinforcing patriarchy, then what's the harm in having gender quotas? I submit to you that gender quotas are a weak mechanism of dealing with any form of gender disparities in the workplace. They cannot deal with the gender differentials within the workforce, largely because they're a cosmetic solution. If we get injured, we ensure that the wound heals, right? We don't just put makeup on it, right? So let's not use gender quotas to just create that gloss. Let's try to deal with the actual issues of gender disparity. I'd like to draw your attention towards an example of gender quotas that have been applied in Pakistan. In 2019, the SECP, the Security and Exchanges Commission, Pakistan, introduced a compulsory quota to encourage women to become boards of directors, because they felt that boardrooms did not have that representation. There was a very strong masculine energy. And as per this particular regulation, I think it was the Listed Companies Code of Governance, yeah, that's what it was, regulation of 2019, that said that at least one female director has to be on your board. Now, realistically speaking, that's great, but there were penalties to it as well. If you did not have a female director on your board, there was a very strong likelihood you would have to incur a financial penalty. Now, the thing with that is many boardrooms did start getting women. The thing is, you're not technically going to increase the participation of women by introducing such policies. This is purely descriptive representation, which is quantifiable. It's increasing the number of people as opposed to the actual substantive participation of women. What ended up happening was, and I think I have the statistic right here, that most people appointed women from their own families to be part of the boards because they felt they were easier to manipulate or easier to tame, or at least they had their own interests at heart. And there's a statistic that reveals about 55% of companies used their familial relationships, whether it was their daughters, their wives, and that was the benchmark, that we will choose a woman based on that. Now, technically that was not the intention behind this regulation. They wanted to increase the participation of women. They wanted to bring forth, talent. Unfortunately, we don't require, as per the law, that the companies should introduce diversity policy, to at least be more accountable and transparent about how they are introducing women into these boardrooms. So, realistically speaking, this shows us that this particular instance shows us that gender quotas could stand the danger of becoming tokenistic and perhaps they could perpetuate patriarchy. Now, earlier I mentioned that meritocracy is all about patriarchy as well in some ways. But the idea fundamentally is merit-based. We are an unequal society. There are barriers for women to enter workforces. There's a glass ceiling, no doubt. So wouldn't it be better for us to have more substantive forms of introducing women into the boardrooms as opposed to just focusing on introducing one woman in there just because there's a familial relationship or whatever? Clearly, if you're not being able to fulfill that goal, and this is probably a problem with the implementation of that quota. It's not the intention. That's why I started off by saying it's well-intentioned. But it's the implementation which becomes a problem. But
1 minute left.
yes. The other thing I wanted to tell you about was the labeling theory. People who are hired on quotas, they tend to be the subject of hostilities, and that could affect their ability to achieve their true potential within the workforce. So why would you subject someone to that? Isn't that also compromising on meritocracy? Isn't meritocracy also about achieving your goal fundamentally as an individual, as a worker? I just tell you that gender quotas are well-meaning, but there are problems with implementation, and they do undermine meritocracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think Taha made some very strong arguments about gender quotas being a weak mechanism and it being a cosmetic solution. I would now invite speakers from the opposition to ask any questions that you may have for him.
Oh, whoops. Okay. That was quite a powerful offering for somebody who said they didn't have statistics. But I wanted to raise another point of view and kind of see if I understand what you're suggesting. In your sort of characterization of how meritocracy works or as a patriarchal tool, do you not think that characterization itself further stigmatizes women and perpetuates negative perceptions about them? And also, if I can ask another related question, if this doesn't work, are Manel's and the model that the Islamic Ideology Council offered of all men taking decisions a better one?
Okay, so another thing I wanted to highlight was that we live in a world dominated by AI, right? Artificial intelligence. We have hiring algorithms in this day, and they can be less biased than the gender quotas. And I suppose there have been some shortcomings for the hiring algorithms as well, because even Amazon has complained that women don't end up, it's not a gender-blind system, but I feel like AI is an ever-evolving field. So maybe instead of gender quotas, let's look into another alternative, which is hiring algorithms through AI. What do you think of that?
Actually, no.
That was just a thought.
But now I would like to open the floor to the opposition side. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from the first speaker of opposition.
Sorry, my chair is a bit low. I think I should stand. That was quite a good segue for the entire conversation from the honorable gentleman, the honorable Prime Minister, if I may call him. Ladies and gentlemen, hands on your heart, how many of you think that there is discrimination against women in our society? I think that simply answers the question, why are we even talking about this? I work in private sector, I work in corporate, and if I had a nickel for every time I hear from a female colleague that they've been asked weird questions from HR, even in some of the best corporates. If there is no need, why are you even asking someone, are you single? Are you married? Do you have children? Do you plan to have children in the next 1 year? Nobody has asked me this question. And I would be very angry if someone does. But to our other side of the gender, these questions are very common. They are being asked these questions all the time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a permanent solution. If we were a country like Iceland, if we were a country like Denmark, where there's gender equality, we wouldn't even need a quota in the first place. There is a dire need to have women representation, be it in the workforce, be it in the senior leadership. There is a dire need to have women there because they are marginalized. Ladies and gentlemen, I come from the largest province in Pakistan, which is also the least developed. I come from Balochistan, and I know as a Baloch man, I've faced certain challenges. I've faced certain stereotypes, be it in the workplace, be it in the society in general. And I can't even fathom, I can't even imagine what the Baloch woman, what the Pashtun woman, what the Sindhi woman would face. It is this very reason that we are even starting to have this debate. I believe in a country like ours, where female literacy is already very low, this should not be even a topic to discuss. Ladies and gentlemen, our honorable Prime Minister, again, if I may call you, has gave a wonderful statistics. He says that there is a law that one board member should be woman. Ladies and gentlemen, think about it. The law says one woman. Even if you have 100 board members, one woman, and that is pinching you so hard. If I talk about another very important point, that is intersectionality, or equality versus equity. If someone who has studied from an amazing private school in Karachi or Islamabad, he or she would already be here. If someone who has studied from a government school, let's say from a village, from Balochistan, from Intricacies, the level of foundation would not be there. So judging both of them equally would be quite unfair. I'm not saying you are not focused on merit. I'm saying give that person an equal opportunity. Bring that person to a par and then see how far they will fly. At least give them an opportunity. That is all I'm asking. It's a very basic point. Gender quotas are addressing historic and systemic biases in our workplace, in our society. Whether the honorable gentleman and the honorable lady agree or not, there is a bias. There is an inherent bias. Think about people who are hiring, people who are in the leadership positions. The finest of private sector organizations, you would see less than 1% women in the leadership. Do you think women are not capable to be in the leadership position? There is a bias. That is the only reason we are demanding that there should be equity before equality. Ladies and gentlemen, merit is there. We are not saying that there should not be merit. Merit should be upheld. It doesn't mean you are slashing a very highly qualified woman to get a very low qualified woman. You're also getting a qualified woman from the pool, but at the same time, you're giving them an equity pool where you can actually convert your thoughts that women can be hired on those positions as well. I think it's a stick or carrot. We've tried the carrot model. It hasn't worked in our society. There has to be a stick. We need to impose these to make sure that women get onto the leadership positions to become role models for the future women as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you made quite a strong argument on how gender quotas are a solution to biases that we have in our society. Now I would like to invite the speakers from the proposition team to ask a question.
So thank you so much, Sikandar, for a very valid argument regarding why gender quotas actually help and enable women. Firstly, you talked about HR hiring practices. As someone who has been part of this field for over 15 years, we ask men and women personal questions which can actually enable our recruitment practice, enable us to make the right choice regarding the talent who becomes a part of our workforce. So it's not women-centric or male-centric. We want to make the best decision. Why? Because we are there to make money. right? As a corporate, you're part of a corporate. So whether it's productivity, whether it's the output that you're going to drive from the workforce is the reason you want to make the right choice when you're hiring someone. Hence, certain questions are asked, which you were quoted were outdated as of today, but we try to make the practice as workforce-centric as possible because we are there to make money for the organization at the end of the day. You talked about women representation, especially in societies where women do not have an equal playing field. And I completely empathize with that. You know, there are areas women do not have that privilege or don't have access to these resources. And what do gender quotas do? They enforce that privilege. Where do we see women coming in and sitting in our parliament? Is it the women of Balochistan who's sitting in a corner from government office? No, it's the women from the privileged background who can actually make use of their family backgrounds and become part of the parliament because they use those gender quotas to put women in boxes and they use those gender quotas to actually stigmatize women, right? So it's not women representation for women, but it's merely to put women in certain boxes where men are like, this is where your corner is, go play in it, right? So women are not being represented, unfortunately, by the women who are supposed to represent them in the best way. And unfortunately, that speaks volumes for Balochistan as well. Talking about, so, you know, when Taha said that it's basically giving a quick solution, it is a quick solution. It is a cosmetic solution.
I'm sorry,
Sorry,
Leader of the Prime Minister, is there a question for me?
Yes, there is. The fact of the matter is that we see that women who are the women that you're talking about, who are part of the gender quotas, are they the best candidates for the job? No, they're not. They're there because the fact that you want to fill them in a box, but they're not the ones who are supposed to who are best qualified to do that job.
Okay, so you're saying corporates make...
Okay, great. Yeah. Sorry, we're confused about the flow right
Please go on. Please go on. This is a point of information from the proposition side.
So you're saying that corporates should be either making money or hiring equally. I don't see a merit in this point. I believe that there are so many studies. I'm sure you are an HR practitioner, you know it far better than me. There's so many studies that say when you bring diversity on the leadership, the companies perform better, the countries perform better. See what's happening in the global north, in countries in the Nordic, in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, where the leadership is equally as women on the men side. They are performing far better. I think you're confusing the inherent biases that we have to justify that, oh, we have to make profit. Nobody to date has asked me, oh, do you plan to have children in the next 1 year? Nobody has based my hiring on that question. But I'm sure so many would feel this way who are women because their hiring would have been stopped bad just because of this question.
Thank you very much. May I please now request the second speaker of the proposition team to present her case. Khadija, please.
So thank you, everybody. Firstly, welcome to this very fiery debate, one which resonates very much with me on a personal level, and I'd like to thank my opposition as well. So I completely believe in gender equality, but not in gender quotas. And there's a reason for it. Why? Because we want the best women to represent us. Right? We do not want to be put in a box. We do not want to be put in a quota and say, okay, this is you, and this is who's going to represent the 90% of you. I was reading up, I was trying to get my data together, and there was actually a statistic by The Economist in that in 2018, they reported that about 10 years of research proved futile, that actually these sort of practices where they had gender quotas did not result in better hiring practices, did not result in better gender equality, and actually resulted in poor hiring decisions as well. So what are we here for? What is its purpose? We're here to hire or enable people. We're not here to discriminate against anyone based on their gender, right? There are minorities, there are ethnicities who are discriminated against. Why not talk about them? Why don't they get a quota? Why are we discriminating on the basis of gender only? Are we saying that that's the only reason why people should be given a platform? Is sex is it? So then we're basically promoting sexism as well, right? So coming on to my main point, which is the risk of tokenism. What does that basically mean? That we are basically promoting individuals who are not the most qualified, who are not the most competent or they don't have the necessary level of expertise to do their job. We see that unfortunately happening a lot in our parliament. We see that a lot happening in boards across the country. This is a global phenomenon. Right? We may take it up very personally when it comes to emerging countries like Pakistan and India. We've had female leaders, but we've seen that women who represent us on the boards are actually not the best women. I have seen women getting promoted because of the familial relationships in Pakistan. Are they the ones who actually were supposed to make it to the top? No, right? We see women representing us in political parties. Did they make it there because they work from the ground up? No. So why are we basically trying to promote practices which result in an unfair and discriminatory attitude towards the women they're supposed to represent? So what we're going to talk about is a level playing field where we create practices where everyone is treated equally and we nurture talent and we try to create a sense of value. How are these people creating that competitive advantage and value to the society that we need? Is it by merely putting them in gender quotas? No, it's by making sure that there are no practices which discriminate against anyone, but by creating a sense of competition, by trying to fix problems which cannot be fixed by merely having a 10% for women. It's by making sure that women have equal access to opportunity. It's not about equality of outcome, it's about equality of opportunity. Do women have access to best schools? Do women have access to best facilities? Do women have access to best healthcare? Women have to take off 9 months from the organization when they take maternity leave. That's the reason you're asking that poor lady, is she going to get pregnant in the next 3 months? A man takes paternity for like 10 days or a week at most, and that's the reason the gentleman's hiring will not be a question. So what we're trying to do is, we want to enable women to be part of the workforce, but we're already discriminating them by putting them in a box or by putting a certain quota. We're saying that only this % of women can actually get access. So we want to create a society where everyone is treated equally, where basically everyone has access to the best education, to the best lifestyle, and does not come from a certain way of life or does not come from a certain privileged class, which gives them automatic entry or accessibility to that quota, which other women do not, right? I, for example, belong to a feudal family, and because of that, I have that access to a MPA seat or whatever, because that's restricted for women. So my chances of getting elected are much higher than somebody else who perhaps does not have that access, right? So why not make it level and equal for everybody? So my perspective to this house is that we as women have been fighting for our rights, for equality. Why are we trying to put ourselves in a box and trying to say that we are only this 10%? Why are we not fighting with the 100%? Why are we not saying we need more seats? We need more voices for ourselves. We need to be heard more, right? Yeah. So that's why I think it is all, again, by reinforcing the concept of equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. So there's some music in the room as well. That's nice. So I have 2 minutes left? Okay, great. So I'm done, or I have 2 minutes?
You can go on for another 2 minutes.
Okay, great. So basically, belonging to HR, I have worked about 15 years in this field, and I remember how much I had to work. I had to fight for every position, and I had to fight to represent myself as a woman. But the respect that I have today is because I worked very hard. It was not because my grandfather owned the company or owned the organization, and I was automatically given a seat at the board. It was because I worked very hard. That's the reason my male colleagues knew they could come up to me and ask for my advice. Unfortunately, when you put quotas on women, you get unqualified candidates at the top, right? We've seen that happening not just in our country, we see that happening across the world, especially when we see that happening in the Silicon Valley. We see that happening in other organizations across the world. We see that happening in the US even, where we have women on the board, which is only 10%, and they're not the best qualified for the job. So you're promoting a way of life which does not promote equity, which does not promote equality, but is promoting a discriminatory practice from the get-go, right? So what I mean to say in a nutshell is let's talk about equality for everyone, and let's promote the best there is of us as women, because I strongly believe that unless we don't get that equality in every way of our life, all women will not be represented by the best of us, but by those who get to be a part of that quota. So that's my argument.
Thank you so much, Khadija. A level playing field for everybody. And why discriminate against gender only? May I ask the opposition team to please raise a point of information for her?
Honorable Prime Minister, I believe you were probably in our team. We're practically saying the same things. Women should have more representation. Ladies and gentlemen, the quotas should not limit women. It does not mean if the quota is 20%, there's only going to be 25% women or 20% women. It is just the segue that minimum at least this many women. I give you another example of the trans bill that was passed in 2018. If we look at the data, only after once you assigned a quota for the trans, there were doctors coming out from the community, there were lawyers coming out of this community. So I again come back to the same point, Honorable Prime Minister, intersectionality. This difference between equity and equality. My simple question to you would be, given where we are in Pakistan right now, what is the alternate solution to bring more women on the leadership, if not gender quota as you term it?
Yeah. So do you want to answer that? Okay, great. Thank you, Sikandar, for a very thought-out question. So my response to that is, why not address the problem at large of the country? The problem is that we don't have access to the same facilities that men do. We don't have access to best way of life. We women are underrepresented, and quotas are not the best way to address it. Yes, that might be a benchmark for you, but that unfortunately in this country becomes the limiting factor. We say 25% and that's it. The 75% is assigned to men, and that happens in all entities, whether that's private or whether that's public. So we basically do create that division for men and women. So it's an unequal footing already, which is created. And that's unfortunate. I am asking here for the bigger pie. I'm asking for 100%. I'm not asking for the 25%. I'm saying, why can't women be the 100% of the workforce instead of just putting them in a 25% benchmark? And we should address the problem at hand. And if we're talking specifically about our country, we're talking about the fact that women do not have access to these opportunities, do not have access to the equal of anything when it comes to a way of life, right? So just just putting them in 25% is not enough for us.
Thank you very much. May I now please request the second speaker of the opposition to present her case?
Yeah, I'll be standing as well because our seats are kind of not part of the quota and working against us. So I want to kind of start on the note that, guess what? I don't like gender quotas either. Like, who would? By admitting that you need a quota, you're basically saying you're guilty. You're guilty that your systems, that your processes, that your society has not worked. It has not delivered for 50% of the organization. Do I wish we needed them? No. I wish quotas weren't needed. But if today my wishes were being granted, I wish also there was no war in Gaza and that chocolate did not make me fat. So, in terms of what Khadija was saying earlier about the pie, I'd love to eat a full pie, but according to the UN Women's Report from earlier this year, at this current rate of progress, if we just let it happen, it's going to take 286 years for us to achieve gender equality. I don't know about you guys, I'm not waiting. So Pakistan's current status is that we rank 153rd out of 156 countries on gender equality. Only 20% of our women are actually part of the productive economy, a number, by the way, that has gone down from 24% since 2020. My point is, we're not doing very well. To make my case further, I'll just talk about a couple of biases, that we have in society. So there's a performance bias that believes that women's performances tends to be underrated. Taha, you talked about AI. In 2020, one of the most elite universities in France conducted an oral exam due to COVID. And interestingly, it was for one racial group, so it was all white people. Because what we found since then is that AI, anybody that followed that Barbie thing that happened, it's heavily racially and sexually biased. But in this particular case, it was one class, one kind of white people, and they were forced to give up the oral exam and had to rely on an anonymous written exam. You know what happened? The admission of women in that university that year was 80% as opposed to the traditional 40% because the examiners couldn't tell women that they didn't belong there. There's also something called an attrition bias. Women are less credited for success, but always blamed for failure, even when they worked in mixed settings. And my absolute favorite one, men interrupt women 3 times, up to 3 times before they let them speak. There's a likability bias. This is one of my favorites. There was a famous case study in Colombia where 2 identical CVs were given to students, one under the name Heidi and the other Howard. Initially, the students rated them both equally because they were near identical as equally competent, but once they figured out that they were different genders, Howard was suddenly likable and a good colleague, and Heidi was aggressive, selfish, and not someone who would be a team player. The point is, we do work in a world where there are these biases. And the final one I want to talk about, and this is probably the most critical in the Pakistan context, is the affinity bias, where we gravitate towards people who look like us, sound like us, are us. And because of that, mentorships, sponsorships, promotions happen within the same gender and same race most often. Who holds the most powerful positions in our country right now? Do you think that structure is open to organic change? Kabhi aurat march ke khilaf response dekha hai? Just asking. And it's also, again, Sikandar talked earlier about how there's a great correlation when you bring women into leadership positions with stronger philanthropic and environmental outputs, but of course the bottom line improves. So actually you make more money when you hire women. So if money and capitalism your primary motivation, you should only be hiring women. And the final point, and I think this is the one that the stick that is used to beat gender quotas, is that gender quotas are not meritocratic. I think that is the most sexist statement to say in 2023. It is based on a belief that male gender privilege and an uneven playing field is fair. It's actually really insulting because what we're suggesting is that only elite, wealthy, middle-aged men should dominate politics and other leadership positions because, what are we saying? Because they deserve to, because of their greater merit, unproven greater merit. This suggests that therefore underrepresented groups like minorities and women of color in different in our, we are a racist society and a colorist society as well. We're saying that the reason they are absent is because they actually don't deserve to be there. And if that's the assertion, I think it's a pretty bold one to make. I just kind of want to close on a point about when opponents like yourselves, Taha and Khadija, argue in favor of merit, what you're actually defending is the status quo. And you're saying that the criteria that we have defined to say what merit is correct, right? But the status quo actually, by its very nature, undermines meritocracy. I'm going to close on a study because I love them. And we talked about Sweden being one of the countries that is somewhat closer to others in achieving this. So a particular study looked at the use of gender quotas for candidate selection in their Democratic Party 10 years before and 10 years after. And they found that the only people impacted by the gender quota was the mediocre man, not the mediocre women. Actually, the overall meritocracy of the cabinet went up once quotas were introduced. Thank you so much.
All right, proposition team, do you have a point of information for the opposition speaker?
Just to clarify, we did not say that we're pro-status quo. On the contrary, we do recognize that patriarchy imposes constraints on meritocracy as well. You mentioned some interesting biases, which I completely agree with. Can you explain how each of these biases can be rectified through quotas? Yeah.
So representation is huge. I think, Taha, coming from the media industry, you will agree that the representation of South Asians very recently, including how excited all of us were by a simple thing like Miss Marvel. We were like, we were so psyched. What was so exciting about her versus another superhero? It's because she was a little girl. So I'm just saying, representation matters. There are countless studies. There was an interesting study in India, which obviously you can sort of look at, very similar to ours. In a village in India, a year after they introduced political quotas only, 33% representation for women in the village councils, they found that child marriage reduced by 15%, that people were more likely to send their daughters to school by 29%. Now, this isn't even the aim of this quota, right? These are just the additional side effects, which are all very beneficial. And when the village elders interviewed the men and women of the village and said, what changed for you? They said, oh, we saw what the future could look like for them, that they can be leaders.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the individual speeches. I would now request a member of the opposition team to summarize their argument.
Oh, is it us first?
Yes.
Okay.
So she basically, we need to tackle her bias.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about how gender quotas undermine merit selection and prioritize merit and competence, undermine merit and competence, and possibly lead to the appointment of less qualified candidates who may not be the best. I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the underqualified men in our political system. I'm not sure if you've seen a parliamentary session recently, definitely not men that I feel very proud to be represented by. And that these boards that we speak of, जिसमें SECP ने एक खातून डाल के इतना दिल में दर्द किया, उसका हाल ये है कि उसमें बेटे भी बैठे हैं, उसमें कज़न्स ही बैठे हैं, मर्द भी फैमिली के ही बैठे हैं. माशाल्लाह बोर्ड में फैमिली के अलावा किसी को इजाज़त वैसे ही नहीं होती, regardless of gender. So I just think stigmatizing a particular tool which 103 countries around the world and which the UN itself endorses as the best solution available, and which Sikandar has said in our sort of imagination should be a temporary solution, because yes, women are 50% of the population. Are we happy with 20% and 30%? No. But are we happy with zero? Certainly not.
Excellent. Let's hear from the proposition team now.
Sorry, so we're having a little chat on the side. Yeah, considering that Amni has basically put us on our feet right now. Yeah, and this chair is kind of swinging as well right now, right? So basically, to sum it up, as you know, Taha said from his excellent speech, how gender quotas and enable a patriarchal culture and enable the elite white men that basically Amni is referring to. Unfortunately, we're all brown in the room as of today. So basically, to summarize what we basically mean and why we are saying that they undermine the very concept of talent, capability, development, competence. Gender quotas do not enable women development. They do not support women development in the best way. And that is why we believe that for the sake of female development and to avoid the biasness that you talked about, attrition, mansplaining, how men overcome women, it is about having a level playing field and about giving all women access to all the opportunities that they can get. And we do not believe that gender quotas are the best way forward to do that. We need to tackle the mindset. We need to tackle the way of life. We need to tackle the political system. We need to tackle the climate, the economic environment, the political environment in which we are raised and the way with this system is created. Because this system stigmatizes and limits women by these quotas, right? It does not enable women, does not enable the best talent that women can be there. As you were talking about the SAT boards, we're talking about boards across in all spheres of every organization. We believe that it is best for women to have access to all those things where if they do leave an organization or if they want to join an organization, they do it because of their own reasons. They do it because of their own talent. And it is not because they were placed there by a 10% quota that was reserved for them. And we want to be represented by the best women. We want to be represented by the best talent. And yes, we do not want to be represented by the elitist white men who will not be representing us. We want to be represented by those brown women who are the best at their job, who are the middle-aged men, sorry. So middle-aged or young or whatever, the idea is that we want to be represented by the best of our gender. So when we have a Benazir Bhutto or someone else sitting there, it's not because she was there part of a quota. right? She was there because she worked hard for her job, because she deserved that position. We have women today in parliament, unfortunately not the best representation of women. And they're because of those quotas that we are trying to promote today. We want to have systems which basically overcome the system of patriarchy. We want to disable the system of today. We want to disable the system which limits us. And that is why we say, let's have practices, let's have a system of transparency, let's have a system of accountability, let's have a system where women are heard. The first thing is to give them a platform of voice, and the platform is not just to put them in a box and to assign them a quota, is in fact to give them that space where they are developed and where they come into a system of equality. Right? They have equal access to everything, and we're not just focusing on the outcome. कि 10% हमने seats भरनी ही भरनी है औरतों से. We are talking about those 45 seats. Why not women compete for all of those instead of just focusing on these 10 seats which are reserved for them? So we are asking for equality for all, and we believe that the best way forward is through, not by having gender quotas, but by having equal representation.
Thank you very much. 286 years to achieve gender equality versus a level playing field for all. My opinion is certainly, I'm actually divided between the two. But before I close the house and thank the speakers for the day, I would like to request the audience to please participate in the post-debate poll. May I please request for the QR code to be displayed behind me? Please scan the QR code like you did for the pre-debate poll and you will be able to participate. Gender quotas undermine meritocracy. We have reserved another 3 minutes for this, for you to participate in this poll. And we are very keen to know if you will vote for the motion or against it after having watched this debate. We heard some very convincing arguments from both the proposition and the opposition teams. And while we are still waiting for the results to roll in, let me take the opportunity to speak about the importance of debate. I believe that the ability to convince, articulate, and evaluate arguments remains not only the lifeblood of democracy and society, but it is essential for the development of an engaged and ethical individual. Thank you for participating. We will just wait for a little while so that more people can vote. We have 1 minute left for the audience poll. The School of Tomorrow conferences have really emerged as a platform where thought leaders and change agents can exchange ideas and conduct critical conversations like the one that we witnessed just now, which can inform the direction of the society at large. I think it is hard to talk about a middle ground for something that is fundamentally the right of all living beings. Having said that, the esteemed participants of this debate presented an excellent mix of very well-picked arguments which were very passionately presented. May we now please see the results? Right. Announcing the results now. The pre-debate poll had 28.21% of the people actually saying that gender quotas do in fact undermine meritocracy. And 71.8% said that it in fact promotes equity. Whereas Well, the post-debate poll says 27.27% do undermine meritocracy, and 72.73% said it promotes equity.
We really shifted the mindset there, yeah?
Very impressive, very
No,
impressive.
can I say you guys are really brave and you were awesome. You really went for the jugular. I loved it.
Excellent, Ji. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before you move on to the next session of your interest, please take a minute to share your feedback about the session on our website. It will just take a click of a button, and this will really help us improve our future events and sessions. Thank you very much.